right, Aimee. Welcome to the podcast. Do you want to give us a bit about yourself and how you got to where you are today?
Sure. I started my career right out of college with Marriott International. I worked in the full service arena, and then um, I started working with a developer named Gary Tharaldson back in the early 90s. And he was developing several Marriott franchise hotels. And so when I started with the company, we had about 40 properties open. And at one point, we were at a peak of almost 400 hotels. So very,
That's
got a
incredible.
lot of, yeah, got a lot of hands-on experience with opening hotels all over the country. We had our own development company that built the hotels, and then my team and I would go in and open them. And I did the general manager role. Then I was an area manager and a regional manager, and then a VP. So I kind of just worked my way up over the course of 30 years to the COO title.
Yeah,
Um, and my role today is not a lot different than starting out as we were opening several properties. It's really making sure that the hotels um, run profitably and that we do a great job taking care of our guests and our
yeah,
employees. We know that if we don't take great care of our employees, they're not going to take great care of the guests. So just really focused on those three mantras of take care of your associates, take care of your guest, and the profit, following the financial guidelines that we've set.
yeah. That's actually kind of amazing, and it's really interesting that you kind of led with the employees kind of straight off the bat because I guess we're like in an extreme battle for talent, and you guys are pretty kind of spread out across the country. Like, what do you think are like? You mentioned kind of like your guest experience as well. Like, what do you think are like three biggest roadblocks, in your role today for like roadblocks challenges for like success?
I think that, look, labor inflation continues to be a big issue. We hire great people and then, someone will try to recruit them away because
Yeah,
we're known in the space for really great training programs. So they know a Tharaldson manager is really well trained. And so,
yeah,
and the other piece is just retaining um, that great talent, whether it's a
yeah.
housekeeper or a front desk employee. I mean, at every level in the organization, it's a grind out there today with
Yeah.
finding great employees.
It's interesting you say that because one of the things I've definitely heard from literally every single one of your peers. So first of all, the problem isn't necessarily unique and you're in really good company. You know what I mean?
Right,
It's like
right.
so like in one sense it's a good thing. But I remember when I started to landed like almost 2 years ago now, the big question was like top of funnel, we need people, we need to get our funnel built back up after COVID. Then it became a question of like finding quality people. And then it became a question of like retaining people. In terms of like the three where you are, what are sort of which one would you say is like the largest priority for you guys?
I think the retention piece right
Yeah,
now, we've put a lot of effort and financially and human capital behind, attracting and finding the talent. And I think the retention piece is really what we come across more and more so, in different parts of the country, but it's not unique to any one part.
yeah. And that's
And
interesting. I mean,
whether, and I've shared this, it could be in the north, the northeast, like the DC area, Virginia area,
yeah.
Maryland. Um, we have the same challenges in California, Nevada, so Colorado. So it's East Coast to West Coast.
Yeah. And that's exactly it, you know. And I like one of the things I've definitely heard from people is like, you know, how the kind of post-COVID sort of mindset, almost like a culture reset for organizations, has been with regards to sort of employee retention and sort of employee brand and the employee experience. Since COVID, have you guys kind of done a reset, or would you say you were always kind of more of a trailblazer when it comes to employee retention and brand employee experience?
No, I think we've had to pivot for sure and make
Yeah,
some adjustments and changes. In fact, this week we had 10 of our, we call them training GMs, um,
yeah,
fly into Phoenix, and they're actually having the meeting now where they're sitting down and reviewing our onboarding process and what that looks like for a new general manager that's joining our organization, and how can we change things to really help them understand not just how the franchise works, but really how Tharaldson Hospitality works, and
yeah,
trying to identify those things that we feel differentiate us from our competitors in terms of culture and
yeah,
um, work-life balance, those types of things. So they're doing their powwow this week, and it's the first time we'd ever done that. So and we've also incorporated our assistant general managers into the training. We have a formalized training program now for them where they all come together in Phoenix and do
yeah,
their training and spend, a week with our director of training, just going over the, what their role looks like, because we
yeah,
know it's easier to promote from within, and that's always been our preference. We love
yeah.
to be able to, give our frontline associates a career path. So this really does help them.
You know, it's interesting you say you mentioned culture, and I love when people mention culture because I mean, you guys are extremely successful. You know, hundreds of locations, and what I feel like I hear that separates like the best brands, excluding like say up and coming sort of new hot hotel groups or hot franchises, whichever. But when I hear like people mention culture, I really feel like that's a real differentiator for what separates the best from everybody else. And what I mean by that is I had like I was saying to you offline, was like the head of OpEx at Dave and Buster's, and it was like there's no patent for what we do here. You know, it's like an arcade and food, but we're almost at 200 locations, and there's nobody in the country even remotely near our size. And how they've retained a huge amount of their staff even post COVID because people enjoyed working there. And I think about that a lot in terms of like what you're saying, which is like, how do you think about culture, and how does culture play into sort of like the retention of sort of staff and make people want to work there? And I'm curious from your perspective, what is your quote unquote like je ne sais quoi when it comes to the culture side of Tharaldson and the hotels that you guys have and the process you have? Like, what do you think is sort of like your cultural secret sauce, so to speak?
I think that it is having a strong communication link to upper management. I give my personal cell phone out to everybody, whether it's a housekeeper or a general manager. We've made the communication piece, you can make it anonymous. They can, send in there's QR codes, and we've really tried to adapt to the way that people want to communicate, and we want to listen. I think I visit a lot of hotels. I go visit our properties, stay in them. Our senior vice president is on the road almost weekly, doing the same thing. And I think having that, letting those associates know they have a voice at the table, a
Yeah,
seat at the table, if you will. And we do listen. And we've made a lot of changes organizationally because of what we've heard in the field and what's happening. Because if you sit in an office all day, you can get jaded by what's really happening. You're not in front of that guest that's upset because the water didn't get hot for them at 6
Yeah.
a.m. So I think being present and senior leadership being very present, very engaged, and
Yeah.
communication has really been relevant.
That's
So
awesome. And
I think
I
I really I think Alex, that's the biggest difference is that a lot of people will say, oh, we've never had a COO sit in our huddle in the morning,
yeah,
our daily huddle. And I love doing that stuff because it's a great way to connect.
totally. And it's interesting that you're really leaning into the communication because again, I think that does separate the wheat from the chaff, like from like peers across the board that I've spoken to, they really lean into having like open communication and easiest processes possible. The fact that you're giving your phone number means, a cleaning person can text you. You know what I mean? Like that sort
Yes,
of like chain of command that you can kind of go straight to the source and escalate a question if necessary, and giving people the sort of the ability, what's the word I'm looking for, sort of like the responsibility of being able to text you in the first place or call you, that permission exists and it's inherent across the organization sounds like kind of unbelievable. You know what I mean? Like it sounds like it's really, really working for you. Do you think like that's also necessary given that presumably a lot of the staff that you're bringing in now are from like a younger generation, like Gen Z, for example? And I'm
yeah,
always curious everyone's take, but obviously they're a lot more phone forward, phone centric than say even me as a geriatric millennial or
yeah.
like everybody else.
Yeah, I think, look, if you looked at, I shared I've been doing this for over 30 years.
Yeah.
So a lot has changed, right? And
Yeah.
and again, it's part of that adaptability piece that I mentioned that we've had to make a lot of changes, in the last couple of years and, really try to see how people want to communicate and whether that's a text or an anonymous email, and having, knowing that they're getting heard. We listen. If there's complaints, if associate has complaints, we have a process that,
Yeah.
they may not be comfortable coming to me with that, but if they're comfortable going to human resources or whatever the case may be, that we have a start and a finish to that issue that they have. So it's
Yeah.
really important that they feel like there's resolution and that we're hearing what they're saying. And it may not always be what they wanted, or agree with the decision that we've made, or but at least they know they've been heard.
Totally. And again, this goes back to your communication, like the message is almost the medium in this case as well, being able to like meet people in a way that they can consume that information, and being able to present it in such a way. So like either having HR sort of like, conflict resolution, for example, and having a process, being able to document it, being able to like write it up and following a very formal standardized process, being able to communicate the whole procedure, obviously is huge. And again, that it hasn't been a norm in hospitality, certainly from like across the board, from like, everybody I've spoken to, it's like everyone's designing these processes or they started with them from the get-go and that's enabled them to grow. But either way, it just goes to show the importance of communicating sort of like on a high level everything that needs to get happen within the organization to keep people aware of what's going on.
Right. Yeah, I think that you nailed it, that conflict resolution. And so we just really I didn't, when we were building our company, we had our prior company, Tharaldson Management. Um,
Yeah.
I left for 3 years, and went to work for another hospitality firm, and then came back and we started Tharaldson Hospitality in 2011, and we had 19 hotels at
Yeah.
that time,
Whoa.
and we've grown now. We're 85 today, soon to be 80.
85. So are you saying, excuse me, 19 in 2011 to 85 today in 2024?
That's correct. And we'll open
Unbelievable
7
growth.
this year. Yeah, we're
7 new locations this year. That's unbelievable.
Yeah. So
Congratulations.
thank you. Thank you. And one of the things that we try to avoid is a bureaucratic environment where you
Yeah,
have to go through so many layers to get an answer where, I think our company is very great at adapting and saying, "Hey, here's a decision." I know my boss, Gary Tharaldson, he can make a decision in a minute. I'll call him.
yeah,
"Hey, here's what we're going to do. Done." And unfortunately, it's not that way in other organizations. So we really pride ourselves on, again, it's the communication piece and getting answers and decisions made quickly.
yeah, totally. Um, that's kind of amazing. And I mean, you got 4 new like locations opening. So you probably like, I mean, does that mean that you have an enormous like hiring challenge ahead of you for
Oh
2024?
yeah,
I
I
like
mean,
when I talk to restaurants, we talk about like say new store openings, and it's like the pressure they're under to have enough staff for when they open a new place. So presumably it's very similar for you that like you probably have to like hire. I mean, it's 4 hotels, and presumably that's at least a couple hundred people.
actually, it's
That's
7 hotels will open this year, but yeah,
7 new hotels.
yep, it's definitely a challenge, but we try, from a timing perspective to bring on a management team, giving soon enough to give them the opportunity to really source and find that human capital that's going to run the hotels. So that you open the doors and we are well trained, and yes, we're going to have some hiccups, but for the most part, there's really good training that goes into all of that. So we
Yeah,
just and the resources, trying to make sure they know the resources that we have available through different departments in the organization, whether it's sales, revenue management, operations. I mean, all of that, we want to give them a point of contact. So if there is a question, they know who to reach out to.
totally. And that makes sense. I mean, I always find like new location openings just very fascinating, just from an organization perspective, because the human component in, in hospitality. I mean, any like a tech company can open an office kind of anywhere. You know what I mean? It doesn't really like, people will go to work. It's fine. But like, I think like to be able to hit the ground running from the get go is such an enormous pressure. I think in particular in your hospitality of like people staying, guests, like I always think of like say hotel like night managers and how difficult it is to recruit that. I hear that from so many of our clients, and I hear that from so many of the podcasts that it's like finding that person in a particular location who's willing to be a night manager is like finding like the ultimate diamond in the rough almost. Like, is there a type of role or position within the 7 new hotels that you're launching that you're like, oh my God, where are we going to find this person?
Yeah, oh, for sure. I mean, and we're not opening in, the markets where
Yeah,
there's low unemployment, right? So, or high unemployment, I should say. And so we've had to get really creative. And we tell these folks, we're trying to hire on personality because we are in the hospitality business, and we'll
yeah,
train on the technical stuff. And so if you go into a restaurant and you have just a phenomenal experience with, a server, um, there's a recruiting opportunity, and or a bartender, and there's a recruiting opportunity. So it doesn't matter if they have hotel experience necessarily,
yeah,
but if they have a great personality. And so we're always looking for that. And we've trained our managers to, when they identify that, it could be somebody behind the rental car agency. I mean,
yeah.
just having that great experience, that one-on-one contact with somebody, and wanting to have that person represent you in your hotel. So we never stop recruiting. So it's always top of mind.
And that's amazing, and what's interesting about what you just said there as well. I'm just writing that quote down. We never stop recruiting, because I think that's just a great line. I should steal that line and put that on our website instead for us. I think
Go right ahead.
it's a great line. I'm gonna quote you. Hey, you'll be on the website. It's interesting you say that because, you know, the more I've done this, I've, the amount of people that have come in, even from my marketing, you know, like we have a car wash business with like north of 100 locations that like, I didn't think that like when we service hospitality, that like car wash would be within that sort of remit, but here we are. And same with like parking services, you know, valet services, these kinds of things. And so like within like hospitality, the broadness, like there's such a broadness to it, which really all stems from a nub that is, you know, great personality, you know, like a passion and great personality for hospitality. And that can kind of come from anywhere. It's just somebody has to have that certain, as I mentioned earlier, that je ne sais quoi, you know, like,
Right,
and what is that, you know?
right.
It's like finding that.
Exactly, exactly. And that's the challenge. And then knowing that, you have that associate can work for you, with you, and then somebody else might be doing the same thing. So again, it's the retention. You kind of circles back to retention.
Yeah.
And we've had several people that our guests have just said, hey, you're awesome. I'd love to have you come work for our company. And so that's why we say, recruiting, it's never done. It's never over, and we are constantly, if we don't have a position, we can always find something for them to do until something opens up.
I mean, and that's incredible that you guys have that flexibility and that cultural flexibility internally. You know, like I don't think I've heard that from anybody at all. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
yeah,
Like if you're a great person, we'll
it's
find a
part of
position for you.
it's part of the fact that we are growing, and we are,
Yeah,
so there's always a need, it seems like, for great talent. And I've
yeah.
never had, I would love to say that we've had 100% of our positions filled at any given time, but that's not reality. That would be
You're not
ideal, but
alone.
it's not reality.
You are not alone. Um, but yeah, I mean, Aimee, thanks so much.